Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is retired quarterback, former Penn State quarterback, Christian Hackenberg. Christian, I know you were trying to get some looks in baseball as a pitcher too, throwing some gas, but you're doing the coaching thing now. You're on the media side. I know what you're doing with the Field of 12, getting into the podcast world. Do you refer to yourself as a retired athlete, or are you going to be, making some sort of a comeback to an athletic field? Because we did talk before we came on about your golfing prowess. So I don't think you should say retired athlete. I probably just mislabeled you.
Yeah, no. The baseball thing was fun. It's funny. My dad will say this too. So my two youngest brothers are playing baseball now. My one, Adam, who played at Clemson, he was a catcher. He got drafted by the White Sox last year. So he's actually down in Winston-Salem in single A. I think they're about to bump him up to double A here pretty soon. And then my youngest brother has been pitching down at Virginia Tech this past year. So they just got knocked out of the Super Regional yesterday, which was a bit of a bummer, but he had a hell of a year. And excited for his future. So baseball was always kind of a thing. And my dad actually tried to push me to baseball my senior year, which was weird. He was a football guy, football coach. My whole family was football, but he really pushed for it. And then that thing kind of got blown out of proportion. I was throwing with a guy down here who had some major league contacts, some guys that threw. And then one day, there's cameras and all this stuff. And I was just kind of tinkering with it to see. But yeah, it was fun. I just didn't have the time to dedicate to it. Kind of what we were touching on. Had a wife, had a house. Was finishing up school, trying to figure out what the next steps were. And I'm kind of an all in or all out guy. And realistically speaking, I would have probably shipped myself off somewhere for about 2 months and just grinded that out for a little bit. And life gets in the way, right? But no, Definitely not a retired athlete. But more of shifting from the professional side to now just beer league, softball, golf, whatever else I can get myself into.
You got the facial hair for beer league softball too. Like that, you have the look down pat pretty good. Like you could definitely, like you're one of those all or nothing home run guys at the plate, aren't you?
Well, so we play with wood bats and no fence. So so it's pretty much rip and run. And then I just play the outfield and try to hose guys. So it's fun. I enjoy it. And I usually try to keep the beer to a minimum, during the week. So, 3 or 4, keep me right at the right equilibrium to make sure I'm tracking things down, but not just a complete train wreck out there.
How hard were you throwing in 2020 when you're just messing around? Because I saw some of the stories where you're hitting north of 90.
Yeah, I was like 93 to 95. Like I said though, dude, it's 10 years ago, 20 years ago, like that's a guy who's a power guy. But now if you're 94 to 95 and, granted, I probably had some more room there if, again, I focused on it and really got some timing and some things of that into account. But, out the box, like that's an everyday guy now. So, just the whole transition of that game and what that means and the chase for speed and power at the pitching position. I wasn't there from a commitment standpoint and where I need to be. But yeah, I mean, I got that gift given to me and, fortunate for it. But like I said, I'll let my little brothers do all that now.
Yeah. So doing the coaching, I want to talk about, obviously we're going to dig into your career and whatnot, but you're right now doing coaching stuff with a former teammate of yours, South Jersey. That's where you're living and kind of taking a different approach to the football stuff. Just kind of fill us in kind of on where you're at, what kind of you're hoping to be able to do with that in the future.
Yeah, man. It's something that I've always knew that I would eventually get into. My grandfather was a high school coach for 30 years. I grew up on the sidelines. My dad coached when I was younger. So if I wasn't, my mom coached volleyball. So if I wasn't in the gym with her, I was on the football field. So being around that, it kind of gets ingrained in you and you always have that itch. And I've been fortunate to have a good stretch of coaches, youth, college level and high school level that influenced me the right way. And I just felt that getting into the high school level was probably where I needed to be. And it was fun last year just because of the purity of it. You got a lot of kids who are looking at you, and you have a lot of you have a lot of experiences, and being able to give them some of those experiences, give them some guidance, and here's where I did things well, and here's where I didn't do things so well, and if I knew this earlier, so being able to impress that on somebody at such a young age, and at a real influential part in their career, while the game is still about football. You take out all of the extracurricular activity that comes with being a college player at a big time program and a professional player. It's about football, and that's what I love about it. And being able to do it with a former teammate, like you mentioned, Bill Belton and I, he was an older guy when I was up there, and we had a real unique relationship. We were tight in the locker room, didn't spend much time with each other outside of the locker room just because of the dynamic of it. I was a younger guy, and he had kind of already ran that course up in college, but getting able to reconnect with him and help him out, that's been awesome. And we got some great kids, and it's been super rewarding, and I've went into it with zero expectations, but am excited to see how that all plays out.
I love hearing that. And guys like yourself who just miss being around the game and getting that opportunity. I read the story that Audrey Snyder did for The Athletic about, how he's telling, a bunch of people, like right after you guys had that conversation, how cool it was to be able to be like, I have all these kids saying, we got Christian Hackenberg to be like our quarterback's coach. Like that's crazy, but you have something to be able to give back. And obviously you're recognizing that. I think anybody who ever watched you saw the talent that you possessed and what it looked like when things were rolling. I mean, I've said this before, not necessarily to your face, but you were the prime example of a guy who you could put together a 5-minute highlight clip and convince somebody that you're Jesus Christ playing quarterback. I mean, really, like your highlights are at a different level. Take me back to your recruitment. You were the 5-star guy who was seen as this, monumental get for Penn State because of all the looming sanctions and all that stuff. And amazingly, like 17 of your 23 commits stayed with the program that class, which is incredible. How close did you come to not going to Penn State?
Yeah, so I'll kind of attack that from a couple of different angles. So I think my recruiting process specifically was more of a unique approach. I was fortunate, I was just down in Virginia, and my high school coach just got inducted into our Hall of Fame at Fork Union, which, isn't Eddie George introduced him. Like it's not your typical high school Hall of Fame. And he played a huge role in it. And then going back to what I was saying, my dad played at Virginia and my mom was an All-American volleyball player at Lehigh. So having both of them with great perspective in that process and what you're trying to get out of it, I had a great team around me. And to be completely honest with you, I was a 3-sport athlete. I played football, baseball, basketball. And now being in the coaching world and kind of what high school sports has become and how much pressure a lot of these kids put on themselves for scholarships and things like that. Like I didn't have any of that. When I got to Fork Union, Coach Sullivan sat me down. We laid out a list of like, if you're good enough, where would you like to play? And now we have to back that up with a process from a weight room standpoint, on the field performance standpoint, all these things. We have to back that up. And we started that as I was a sophomore. I was freaking 6'3", 165 pounds soaking wet.
Jeez.
So yeah, we really laid out a long-term plan and what you're looking to get out of a school. And from that point in my career that I want to play professional football. Since I could touch football, I want to play in the NFL. So that played a huge role in it. And that ultimately ties into why I ended up at Penn State, because ironically, Penn State wasn't even on my radar. When I was down to like my last 5, I was pretty much signed, sealed, delivered to Alabama. Like I was going to Alabama. And when Coach O'Brien got the job, it was really unique. I've told this story before, but we had a guy who actually played for him at Duke who was working with our post-grad program, Norman G. And he was like, hey, man, I know you had Penn State on your initial list. I was going up to play pickup basketball in the SD Center. And he's like, I got Bill up there. I played for him. I think he'd be a really good fit. He just came from New England. You're talking about wanting to play in the NFL. Like this guy's running a pro system. It'll really fit your skill set, this and that and the other thing. And I was like, yeah, gee, whatever, dude. Send my tape up there. And I went up and played basketball for 4 hours. And then, 3 days later, Charles London's downstairs in the SD Center. And, we're talking about a scholarship and getting me up on campus and getting me to learn everything. So that kind of happened really fast. But ultimately, when I got to Penn State and, going back to what Coach Sullivan had initially laid out with me in terms of academically, athletically, and socially, what you want to get out of school, Penn State checked all those boxes. And then in some areas, check plus, when it came to ultimately what my goals wanted to be. So that's kind of what led me to Penn State. And then once I made the decision, my parents were very adamant about, this isn't one of those things where, you kind of float around and you kind of soft this and soft that. Like, if you're going, you're going. And unless something completely out of just left field comes in, which ironically kind of happened.
Yep.
You got to think about it. But, even when that did happen, we went back to our checklist and was like, did anything really change? Like, no bowl games, no, like, at the end of the day, yeah. Do you want to go compete for national championships and playing cool bowl games? 100%. But at the end of the day, net result, again, playing in the NFL and playing in a system that's going to really prepare you for that, it didn't change. And then, the impact you have on a school like Penn State, largest alumni base in the country, you're talking about 800,000 living alumni, like, outside of football, having stuck through that, I'm starting, even now, just being more separated from the game and even separated from Penn State, you're starting to see the impact that's had on people. You go up there on campus and you talk to people, and that's the first thing they bring up. They don't bring up anything about, on the field, this, that, what could have been. It's this very sincere thank you. And that side of it grew as I was on campus exponentially, as a main reason why I stuck it out.
Okay, the Alabama stuff, because that's before, just to tell people at home, like, the timeline of this, like, you're a 2013 recruit. And so this is before Lane comes in and reinvents the offense. So at that time, you're probably thinking to yourself, I could be an AJ McCarron type role in that system, where he obviously had a lot of success. And they changed the offense, of course, when Lane gets there. But, like, you said Science Field delivered. Kind of what was the background? Was Saban coming to your house and, like, being able to pitch you? Just kind of give us the details about that.
Yeah, so Saban flew in actually to Fort Union. It was a funny story. We were playing pickup basketball with our post grads, and that was like a big thing. Like, our post grad football and our post grad and our regular high school football, we had probably 3 or 4 kids in my class that could play. But we ran some serious games up there, and Saban actually came in to school that one day, and Mike Groh was recruiting me, and Mike knew me. My dad actually hosted Mike at Virginia, so Mike's known me since I was freaking 9 years old. So they came in, and I got a guy at the top of the key, crammed a ball right as Saban was walking through the doors, like right underneath the hoop. And he goes, "Who the hell was that?" And my dad's like, "I was Christian." He goes, "Have him throw 3 footballs. We're done here." And but talking about that specific situation, obviously Coach Saban he's established a program there that's to this day is still running. And I think his standard in terms of development of players is huge. And I always like those coaches who were kind of not about the fluff. They were about the process, and then the results at the end of it were going to come as long as you put the time in during the process. And I looked at that situation, I think AJ was playing at that point in time, and the system was great. Like, work off play action, you're going to be probably accounted with having to execute on 5 or 6 third and medium to third and longs a game, but stay on schedule, work off play action, get outside the pocket. Like, that fit my skill set, to your point, like pushing the ball down the field, intermediate to deep passing game. And I really like that. And then you got guys out there that can really get it and make plays. So that's what really drew me to that situation.
I got to imagine the negative recruiting stuff for you was all over the place. I know James Franklin talked about that a lot, and I realized he wasn't recruiting you at the time, but I even remember talking to Miles.
Dropping some of that negative stuff.
Yeah, I mean, goodness gracious, like, that had to be all over the place. I remember talking to Miles Sanders at the Under Armour All-America game, and that would have been at the end of 2015 because he was a 2016 recruit. And he was saying, "Oh yeah, I'm thinking about Michigan State kind of as my fallback just in case stuff happens at Penn State." And it's like, what are you talking about? You're like a month away from signing, and you still got people that are calling you and telling you, "Hey, stuff can blow up and it can hit the fan." And I imagine that when you were going through it, like, you were really dealing with those phone calls where people are like, "Hey, you're never going to be able to play in a bowl game, do this, and this." Like, what exactly was that like, that experience?
Yeah, I mean, that happened, right? And obviously, I think recruiting's even evolved to another level since I was there with social media. And there's a lot of different touch points now that you can get in touch with these kids. And like I said, kind of going back, I was really, really fortunate to have the people around me that I did. And like Coach Sullivan was a huge buffer for me. Like, anybody that came to school that said, "Hey, we want to talk to Hackenberg," I'd either get called to the athletic director's office, sit down with him and be like, hey, XYZ school wants to talk to you. What do you want to do? I'd be like, nah. So he served as a really good buffer for me, at least, on campus touch points. But yeah, you dealt with the phone calls and things of that nature, but I always try to handle it in the most professional manner. You don't want to burn bridges with guys, but just try to make them understand that, and I'm sure it was probably weird coming from a 16-year-old kid and having that type of perspective. But like I said, it was 17-year-old kid, but it was a lot of credit due to my circle, and they guided me through that. So it alleviated it, but I can only imagine if that was the case now with everything going on like that, it would have been insane.
You definitely passed the eye test as a true freshman, 2013. That year with Bill O'Brien, and I talked to your buddy Adam Brenneman about this. You guys were just you were discovering something that I think was really promising, and people kind of forget how bad it could have been based on expectations. And you win Big Ten Freshman of the Year. I remember watching that Wisconsin game, just thinking this kid is on his way, and it really looked like it was all clicking. Why did you work so well with Bill O'Brien and some of the concepts that he had?
Yeah, I think, again, that was part of my evaluation process, and I really liked the system. And not only that, he gave me so much flexibility. And it was to the point where, like, every time I got in a game, I wasn't thinking about execution really, like from this was the play call. Like I was thinking, like, is this the right play for what they're giving us? So I almost got lost in this in that process of, like, I'm just trying to get our team in the best situation possible, whether it's, run to run, pass to run to pass, whatever it may be. He gave me a ton of flexibility at the line of scrimmage. So when I got into something, or if something was called, I knew what he wanted out of it and the whys behind all of it. And it just made it so much easier for me. And there was a ton of study on defenses and how to defeat it. And that was the biggest thing. I mean, he taught me so much about the game. And that was, I think, outside of the physical tool sets, just the ability to really get lost in that process and almost playing the mental game as much as you were the physical game really meshed well with me. And as the year went on, I got faster and faster with it. And I had answers. And like that Wisconsin game, I mean, I still talk about this. Me and Chris Borland went back and forth 3 or 4 times at the line of scrimmage. Like that guy was unbelievable. And he'd call checks out and I'd, reload it, disco it, try and get into something else. Like, so that was really fun for me. And I think Bill having the trust that he had in me, and then also teaching me along the way, like it sucks because I felt like we only scratched the surface. Cause again, I was 18 years old and I felt really, really good about it. But everything kind of happens for a reason, and it was what it was at that point. But I just felt like that system really fit my skill set well in terms of how I approach the game, both mentally and physically.
Do you remember what it was like when when you found out that he was going to the Texans? Did you have like some sort of sit down where you just think to yourself, man, like this is just like the gut punch that I wasn't looking for right now?
Yeah, dude, it was New Year's Eve. But yeah, it was interesting. And again, he and I still have to, sit there over a case of beer and talk through that at some point in time, and I'm sure that'll happen. But it was hard because I respected him and I knew kind of that was his end game and end goal. But at the same time, and I don't know if Brenneman and you touched on this, but like to your point, like we kept 17 of the 23 guys in that class that made it through, and like everything outside of football for what it meant for the program and university and the alumni and the lettermen. He kind of he told us he was going to see us through. And when it didn't happen, that was the only side that I still hold a point of contention, was like, you had kids who literally sacrificed their futures at times for this, and you ran for the money, which is cool. Again, I understand it's a business and it's capitalism. You got to do what you got to do. But that was kind of that was the only thing. And I'm over it at this point. And like I said, I'm sure he's doing well and moving on from everything that happened with that. But I think it was just a really cool situation, and it was bigger than football, and it was bigger than the business of football. And had he stuck it through, who knows what happens. But that was really the only like mental side of things in my brain that I fought with. And there was a lot of other things. So I didn't blame him, but then there was still a part of me that was like, gosh, man, like, you know, we still got some unfinished business, but again, you know, things happen.
How many pops deep were you on New Year's Eve when you found that out?
I was doing a keg stand, actually.
What? No way. All right. You can't just gloss over that. Or you got to tell that story.
Keg stand, and my phone starts buzzing, and I thought it was my buddy calling me from the house next door. And I started kicking my legs and was like, let me down, and pick it up. Didn't even look at the caller ID. It's like, hey, what's up? What's up? Hack. Oh, coach, what's going on, man? I'm going to Houston. I was like,
no.
Yeah, dude. This is actually the first time I've ever told that story. So that's a big thing. But yeah, man, I was doing a kickstand up at JMU, actually, because JMU is only about an hour from my house. And we had we had a bunch of buddies that were at school there, and we had that long Christmas break because we didn't have a bowl game. And so that's how I found out. And then I walk in the house and it's all over ESPN, and it was super awkward the rest of the night. And I was just like, I'm over this. So, but that's a funny one that I get a hold on. And, you know, I laugh about it now. My dad still busts my balls about it, but it was funny. So
there are buzzkills, and then there's whatever that is. That's a different level.
It's its own category.
Goodness. Did you see eye to eye with James Franklin?
You know, I think it's hard. I think he was in a different process in terms of what he was trying to do when he got on campus. And I think really those 2 years were when we probably got hit hardest with the sanctions from a depth standpoint. And you're talking, 60 to 70% of our team were freshmen, redshirt freshmen, or redshirt sophomores. So you had a lot of guys who didn't play a lot of football. Brian Guy and Derek Dowery were defensive tackles their first 2 years, and then they were starting guards for us. So like there was a lot of fires that we had to put out. And at the end of the day, I think it's a huge testament to everybody involved. The fact that we didn't have a losing season in the 3 years that I was there with all of that. And I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough about those situations. And ultimately, like when you're coming in with a completely different mindset, because they were very different. Him and Bill were very, very different.
Understatement.
In terms of like how they wanted to run a program and how they wanted it to be. Like Bill was kind of like football. You know, you get in this building, it's sacred. He ran it very much like a pro locker room. Like, you know, you get what you earn, you know, in terms of leash and live and things like that with everything that's going on campus. And, you know, if you're playing, like we're gonna treat you like a pro. Coach Franklin was very kind of like wanted to create buzz, wanted to get more marketing media, wanted to pump money into the program and build new locker rooms and new weight rooms and things of that nature. So it was just a very different approach.
There are very few times when I will watch a football game and feel bad for a guy. The 2015 opener against Temple, that was one of them. So for those who don't know that game, you got sacked 10 times. It actually felt like it could have been more. And I watched it back this morning. I was like, you probably could have gotten sacked 15 times that game. I mean, it was rough. And I still say though, and I actually kind of forgot about this, that the ball that you had to Deshaun Hamilton down the left sideline, if that's like a yard, like that's a touchdown at 17-0. It's probably a different game. And that day just turns out much differently. The offensive line play, you talked about that. That was the biggest thing. And for those who don't know kind of the Penn State story during the 2010s, that was the biggest point of concern, what was really hit hard. But can you explain what that day was like, knowing that you were just a sitting duck?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, dude. Like we had a lot of expectations because we came up. I mean, we just beat all spring. Like we beat Boston College, who was a top 5 defense in the Pinstripe Bowl. It was our first bowl game back. Like that was there was a lot of momentum going into that season, I think. And, you know, understanding everything that was going on, you know, we had some experience. We had a good spring ball. We had a good camp going into it. And to be completely honest, like, and I don't want to discredit Matt Rule and that Temple team. Like that was a really good football team.
They were.
It was a very good football team, and they have a lot of guys that are still playing in the NFL off that defensive roster. And, you know, they did a great job, but it was frustrating. And I think that was always the hardest part. Like we were kind of a jack of all trades and a master of none. We really didn't have an identity on offense those last 2 years in terms of like, this is what we want to do, because we had a hard time running the football. So, you know, down in distances were, you know, second long, you know, those types of things. And that's the one thing that that I look back on my career and I'm like, I just wish that I would have done more to focus on like, how can I keep us out of those situations as much as there's things that I could have worked on and got better at. But at the end of the day, like, it was just about putting out a bunch of big fires and then taking advantage of shots when I got shots to be able to do it. And I think that was the hardest part. And that game was just one of those ones where like, it wasn't clicking, it wasn't rolling. We couldn't really do much. We had a couple explosives early and we were out rolling, but then once they kind of figured it out and dialed it up, they kept us off schedule. And when you have a team that, you can't turn around and hand the ball off and guarantee you're going to get 3.5, 4 yards a pop. Like it's tough. And we needed to create a little bit more of an identity from that standpoint. And yeah, that game wasn't fun. Sunday morning was definitely not fun, but that game was one of the worst losses in Penn State history, I think. But, again, not to discredit that Temple team, though. It was a good football team.
Yeah, they had 3 guys drafted on that defense alone. Like they it's Matt Rule. It's still like it ended up being a much better. Who's that guy? Like Manikavich or whoever that was. Man, he just he was in your ear the entire game. It's brutal. And I think people could look back on stuff like that and they'll see, Saquon, they'll see Gesicki, they'll see, Chris Godwin, and they'll see all these guys and they'll say like, well, why didn't it work? And to that point, I would say, well, look at 2018 LSU. Like 2018 LSU had Joe Burrow, it had Jamar Chase, it had Justin Jefferson, it had all these guys, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but it still goes to show you still need the right offense. You still need that offensive line. And that's really kind of and you need the right play calling, the right philosophy to be able to make this thing go. Like, I think I look back on your career and I always kind of wonder if that day had gone differently, if that could have been a potential turning point. I know you had a tough sophomore year, but was there ever a moment where, in the back of your mind, we always talk about like quarterbacks seeing ghosts, the Sam Darnold thing. Was there ever a moment where you felt like you lost some of that confidence and the game kind of changed for you?
I don't think I ever really saw ghosts because I didn't have a problem taking it in the teeth, but I think like, getting now into what happens subconsciously as a quarterback, like there were a lot of things that got messed up with me mechanically. And then I never had time to fix it because I had to get ready to go play the next week. So there was just like I said, just overall process. It became much more less about like my own development. And I'm talking not only on the field, but then like, again, going into the big picture about like Penn State and keeping the program alive, it was less about my development and more about like keeping the ship afloat, like driving the ship. I don't care if we're down 2 or 3 turbines, like we still got to keep the ship going in the right direction. And that's kind of what my approach was. And that's it's not even a regret. Like that's the only thing that I could look at in my career and say like getting hit as much as I did, like that's going to affect me subconsciously. And then me not being able to truly develop from a technical standpoint in my game for 2 years, because I'm just like, at the end of the day, it was probably my issues were on our list of issues somewhere down here in terms of what we needed to fix in order to keep things going, because I compensated at times to be able to keep us rolling. So that's the only thing where for me, I look back at it and like, scars. I think scars, less than ghosts. I think it's just more scar tissue. Like scar tissue built up, and it just didn't work out.
Mechanically, what would you have been able to? What do you think you would have tweaked that would have kind of helped?
There's a lot of things, and that's a really long conversation. But ultimately, I think I actually got to them, but it was too late in my career, and just tightening some things up, cleaning up the feet. But like again, it was just when you're constantly like not sure what's going to happen specifically in the pocket. I guess there are ghosts there, but like I said, I would more dedicate it as scar tissue, and then just being able to speed things up and trust it. I think for me.
What was the toughest moment for you during college? Because the moments that you had that were where you just come away and everybody's like talking about the first round stuff all over again. And then, you're still able to go into the combine, put a good showing together enough to where it was like, all right, there's going to be a team that's going to take a chance, despite some of the mechanical issues that you're working through. But what was kind of maybe the toughest moment to be able to kind of just, strap it on and be the politically correct quarterback who, was ultimately couldn't show any sort of fault?
Yeah, I think you hit it with my sophomore year. Like my sophomore year was because it started off with a bang over in Ireland. I think 450. Like awesome. But then the middle of that year was the biggest grind of my life. And I actually, like, going into my junior year, because I had an idea that, like, I physically couldn't stay there and do it again for another year if that was going to be the case.
Yeah.
Kind of had an idea, like, I want to have as much fun as I can my junior year with everything that's going on, and just have as much fun with it and love the time with my teammates and let it fly, and however the cards fall, they'll fall. But I didn't have that perspective going into my sophomore year. And I think that was where I learned to have that perspective going into my junior year. So I think my sophomore year, kind of that middle of the season, was just like, that was, and then I ended, in the Pinstripe Bowl with another really good performance. But that like middle part was probably the darkest. I mean, I was radio silent on my parents, my high school coach, my girlfriend at the time is now my wife. Like, I was very, very shut down in a box, like not really good mentally. But having to try to overcome that was probably one of the better parts as well. Having put myself through that and then having to get through that, I think it's only prepared me more for being able to handle everything else that came down the pipe.
Your girlfriend forgave you. I mean, that's all that matters in the end, right?
Yeah, that's a big win. stacking wins off of it.
Yeah. What do you think your college career, your NFL career could have been like if you had those 3 years with Bill O'Brien?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I try not to live in that hypothetical world.
I'll live there for you. That's fine.
Yeah, you can live there. Who knows, right? Who knows? But at the end of the day, that's not how it happened, right? And kind of bringing this full circle, like, I think, who knows? Like, maybe would I have had the ability to then articulate things and then be forced to go try and learn, like, where I could have gotten better and did, and it was a little too late at that point in time in my career. And now, like, I have the opportunity to bring that to these kids at the high school level. So, like, again, like, bigger picture, everything happens for a reason. Those experiences, I think, are invaluable, and it's just going to make me a better person, better coach, better teammate, better brother, better son, all those things. So I try not to live in that hypothetical world, but who knows? But I the only thing I do know is that freshman year was awesome. It was really good from all levels with me. And, even going back to that, like I said, my offensive line that whole year was like Ty Howell, who's now coaching there. He was a 5th year guy, Deef, Gret, like, there was a lot of guys there that played a lot of football, and we stayed healthy, and they allowed me to make my freshman mistakes and then be confident to know that I can still make another call, or I can get into another play and run another check, and they'll help me clean it up. And then by the middle of the year, they trusted me wholeheartedly, and that's the one thing I say, like, everyone asks me about, like, freshmen stepping into that situation. Like, you just got to get your teammates and your coaches to trust you. And I had it. And then, your talent takes over. So that was huge for me.
Best story from draft night was what?
What'd you say?
Best story from draft night was what?
I don't know. We had a great time. I kind of kept it tight knit. We were at my house. I didn't really remember much of draft night after the phone call, but it was great. Like, it was just something you never forget. And again, like, ultimately going all the way back, like, that process started when I was 2 years old. So to see it kind of come through to fruition and all the experiences in between, I think it was just getting that call and then, being able to enjoy it with the people that ultimately helped shape a lot of that path.
Did you get were you doing a keg stand when you got the call from the Jets?
No. I was playing cornhole.
You're probably a really good cornhole player, aren't you?
I like playing cornhole. Yeah. We used to take it super serious. And, since I've moved up here and not with there were nights my brothers and I would sit out there for freaking hours, and my dad, damn near come to fist fight over some of that stuff. But yeah, I do enjoy it. I do enjoy some boards and some beer.
Pancakes. You got to throw pancake style. If you're not throwing pancake style, like, I
don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, like, get out of here. Like, you're a casual, as they would say. You got to be throwing pancakes all day. I wrote multiple times about I hated how protective the Jets were of you throughout that preseason, and like, I get it. You talked about the mechanical issues that you're trying to work through, but I'm like, this guy had all eyes on him at Penn State, so you can't tell me that the New York media is going to, like, beat him up And oh, by the way, you took a beating. So it wasn't like you were going to take a hit and all of a sudden you were going to be scarred from it. What do you think kind of made them sort of treat you with those kids' gloves? And was there maybe a method to their madness that we didn't really see?
I don't know, man. And I think that's, obviously I have a ton of respect for the organization because they did take a chance on, they drafted me, and there's part of that, mutual relationship there where like, they made my childhood dreams come true. But I just think it was a really unique situation. It was a loaded quarterback room. I mean, I was the fourth guy in there, and we kept 4 throughout that whole year. So like that usually doesn't happen. And I think just the overall game plan for me wasn't great. And then, you talk about drafting me in the second round. Like there's a lot of expectations that come with that. And if you want to handle somebody in more of a developmental way, the slot and the process kind of never matched up. You know what I mean? And that's where I think in the NFL level, like almost getting drafted to a good situation is, especially at the quarterback position, is much more important than where you start in terms of where you get drafted at, right? And I think that's just where the disconnect was. And not really having a set in stone plan of development and wanting to have that and not really getting the answers. And then, like you said, like having to fight battles on a lot of different fronts that really I shouldn't have been fighting at 20, 21 years old. Cause that's the other thing. I mean, I was young. Like I was 20 my entire time I was training. I couldn't even go and get a beer. So, there was a lot of like timing and situational things that went with that. So it's kind of like, that's a double-edged sword, right? But ultimately, again, it's just one of those things like unlucky situation, unlucky plan. And, did I learn a lot from it? 100%. And it probably has absolutely nothing to do with football. You know what I mean? And that's cool, right? I feel like as long as you take that approach and you're not bitter about it, you're going to be cool on the other side. And I think it's opened my eyes to now like making sure that every time I get in a situation from a coaching standpoint or whatever it may be, even doing some media stuff, like I really try to empathize and dive deeper into that side of the story, because I feel like it's often the side of the story that gets overlooked by a lot of people, and they don't realize how much of an impact that can actually have on some kid subliminally, because every kid's gonna deny it, but subliminally, like that's always there. And if you can't analyze that side and you're just analyzing strictly on a stat sheet or numbers, like anyone can do that. You can teach anyone to read a stat sheet and be like, oh, that's a solid performance, right? But like when you're sitting there talking about the holistic approach to it and the quarterback position specifically, because to me it's the most dependent position in sports. There's not any other position in sports that has that many people that, you could do your job perfectly. And if 5 guys don't, it looks like an absolute shit show out there. It's a different animal in its own sense. So that's the one side that I really now start looking into, like even, high school level, like I evaluate what our kids do well and I push our offensive coordinator to do that. And if you try to stuff a square peg into a round hole consistently, you're not only going to hurt yourself, but you're going to hurt the kid. And, I'm much more cognizant and aware of that side of things than I think a lot of people, just because of my experiences.
Yeah, I think you will be in that way. And I hate using the phrase cautionary tale, but there is some of that with you and your story and watching you kind of go through this criticism where, man, like from being 16, 17 years old, pretty much for a 5-year stretch, you really could not be let up for air. There was not any sort of, hey, you're going to be out of the spotlight and kind of taken away from this pressure that your talent has brought upon, like in obviously the way that you played your freshman year. But, I think we've kind of danced around this. Is there maybe one sort of what if, one thing that you could go back and change in your career? And I know you've been asked that before. I see you smiling, of course, but like, I don't know, even if it's transferring after 2014, transfer rules were different at the time. So maybe that's not even the best way to go about it, but is there like one specific thing that you would be able to snap your fingers and change? Is there anything?
Yeah. I mean, I think we touched on it. I think obviously like having the year I did and all the correlation, like at the end of the day, the expectations got set way higher than you could consistently produce. Right. So like for me, I think, obviously, like I would have loved to have Bill for 3 years, and that's not knocking Coach Franklin or any of those other circumstances. It's just like I fit really well. I knew what I was doing, and like going into an off season at 18 years old, like I was fired up for the next year because I knew what was going to happen. There was no change. There was no, deep rooted uprooting of the entire process. So like, I guess what if, like, I wish I could have had a few more years with Bill, especially in that like really incremental development stage. But again, like it didn't happen. And I think I just got, like I said, I've gotten developed in a lot more different ways, other than playing the game. Right. And, those things I think are going to carry on much more than, had I gone on to do whatever from an on the field standpoint. Like, I feel like that's great and all, but it's the lessons I got taught are much more valuable, I think, in the grand scheme of life. Right. And that's my approach to it.
I am the number one Joe Moorhead podcast on planet Earth, so I'm contractually obligated to say that the correct answer to that question was leaving early and not being able to play a year with Joe Moorhead at Penn State.
That too, that's what's funny though. I honestly, because I met with Coach Moorhead right when he got on, but like I said, I was just at that point where it was like this ship had rode its course. And I do say that, like, I think I did leave a year early. I do say that on the side. I'm happy you brought that up because I completely just lost my mind. Completely left my mind. But, was a huge fan of the way he ran things. And I think was at that point in time, the stability that Coach Franklin needed from an offensive side of the football. And to your point, like you talked about like Gesicki and Saquon and Chris and all these guys running around. But they were all puppies.
Yeah.
Like in 14 to 15, like they were puppies. And like, I don't know if you remember 14, Gesicki could catch a beach ball. If he
dropped everything.
And I could say that because I still talk to him all the time and I love him to death. And, I was probably part of the reason why he ended up coming out of the other side. We lived together. I was throwing everything I could at him at the house. Can of Cool Whip, whatever it was, just catch him off guard so he could. I'm like, see, you can do it, dude. But he, they were puppies. And then when Moorhead got there, like they were coming into their own. And it was just a really cool process. And like even Trace, like having Trace for 2 years behind me, like I love that kid to death and like so happy that he got into that situation with his skill set and kind of like, it was very similar to my freshman year stepping in with Bill, where like I stepped into a system with zero scars, zero expectations at the college level, and it just fit. And I think that happened with Trace really well. And I was super happy for that team and the way that they went on to do things. And I think a lot of it did have to do with Joe Moorhead and his process and his thought process towards things.
I'll put that in the file, the pro Moorhead file that I keep on, just on my desk right here. It's always there. So we'll definitely add that to it.
You can file that away.
Yeah. I want to get you out of here with some rapid fire, just 5 questions. First thing that comes to mind. Does that work?
Sure.
You gave me a look like I'm going to give you. I'm not going to. Come on. I don't throw 95 on the black like you do. All right. We'll be fine. What would your dream NIL deal have been?
Oh, I'm simple, man. I'd have taken like a jacked up F-250, like clean, just drive it around. I bought a Silverado from my uncle who actually was in the military, and the thing was an 01, low mileage, didn't do anything, but I'd have killed to have like a nice truck.
Yeah, you would have had that before you stepped on campus. There's no doubt about that whatsoever.
Yeah.
I assume that anybody who spent time in Pennsylvania is a fan of The Office. So your favorite character on The Office was who?
That's tough, dude. I mean, Steve Carell, like it's hard not to like his whole, I mean, that thing he did an incredible job throughout that entire series. So his WAR, like leaving that show, that's the baseball stat WAR. Like his level above wins above replacement is just insane, obviously, because it went downhill after him. But yeah. I agree with you. Yeah. A little birdie once told me that James Franklin was a psychopath before that 2014 opener in Dublin. Can you confirm or deny that? All I'm going to say is I spent a week in Dublin, right outside of Dublin, with a beautiful golf course that I could walk to, and I didn't even hit a golf ball. And my dad and his buddies landed in Shannon and played like 6 courses the entire way up to Dublin. And they're sending me pictures and sending me videos. And I was just like, I can't believe I'm in Ireland and I haven't hit a golf ball. So yeah, so that, I mean, I'm not gonna say a psycho, but I just didn't have the time to do that, and that would have been important to me.
It was very regimented from what I had heard. And then, by the way, that's not an Adam thing. That's I actually went to Dublin and like went to the Irish games that they had there. And I remember talking to like one of the supervisors there, and he was like, "Yeah, that James Franklin guy, man, he is nuts, absolutely nuts."
We were extremely regimented.
Yeah, would expect nothing less. Okay, where would you go to school if you were Arch Manning? And you're not allowed to say Penn State, by the way.
Obviously, I mean, shoot, dude. It's hard. I mean, it's hard. I was on the Georgia train the beginning of the year last year. I think that I love Kirby, but it's funny. Like all of his options kind of branch off the Saban tree in some way, shape, or form. So I don't think the kid can go wrong. I do want to say this though. I love the way that he's handled everything. And I expect nothing less from the Manning family. I was able to spend some time with them down at the Manning camp when I was there, and I think they've done a fantastic job with that, just keeping him out of the spotlight and keeping it fun for him. But like, I don't know, man. It'd be tough not to go to Georgia.
Last one for you, and I guess kind of similar to that. If you had to give a piece of advice to any high school quarterback, what would it be?
Yeah, I tell this to our kids all the time. Like, have fun and enjoy it, because, and I'm talking like the high school game. Like, just enjoy it. Like, the process is going to take care of itself. It's going to run its course, and at the end of the day, you know, where you get recruited and who you get recruited by is probably going to be where you're going to be able to go out and play and have fun and have a good career. But enjoy the time under the lights on Friday nights, because it is, to this day, and I think you can talk to a lot of guys, they'll say that's some of their most fond memories, and it's so pure. Like I said, it's just, there's a purity with it. Like, enjoy it. It's what the game's about.
Hack, this was a blast. Absolute blast. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, man. I really appreciate the time. Best of luck with everything you got going on.
No problem. Appreciate you too, bro.
You're good to go. Sweet, man. That was awesome. I really do appreciate it.